evolution of money has tipped the scales towards cryptocurrency. According to an April survey conducted by the Pew Research Center, it revealed overall 17% of U.S. adults say that they've either invested in or traded with cryptocurrency. Educating yourselves on the myths and common misconceptions surrounding cryptocurrency is a must if you're going to use it effectively, efficiently, and if it ever is to have sustainable staying power. Professor Tonya M. Evans is the author of Digital Money Demystified, the essential myth-busting guide which empowers the crypto-curious to be the crypto-confident. Dr. Evans is also a professional writer, speaker, and law professor. She is also the host of the weekly popular podcast, Tech Intersect, an engaging and informative weekly show which highlights new and notables, preparing new-collar professionals for the future of work, wealth, and creativity. During my conversation with Dr. Evans, we also touched upon the current state of educational equity and equality in America today, and while it's so important for young people to know how to invest, save, and manage their money. This will be a conversation that you will be glad that you had the chance to encounter. So without further delay, I'm Kevin McShann. Let's have this conversation. I'll take a moment to welcome you to the program, and I'm super excited to talk to you about cryptocurrency and how it can make the world a better place. Great to see you this afternoon, and thank you so very much for accepting my invitation to engage in conversation. It's great to see you today.
Thank you. It's great to see you as well, Kevin, and I'm looking forward to it. I've been looking forward to our conversation and our time together, so I am at your disposal, sir.
As am I, Dr. Evans. I know that you're all about digital money. I know you're the author of the book, Digital Money Demystified, the essential myth-busting guide to empower the crypto-curious to be the crypto-confident. So I'm wondering if we can start our conversation by you telling me about your book and what it's all about.
Yeah, well, when I thought about, let me take a step to the side. I'm a law professor, a full-time law professor, a full tenured professor at Penn State Dickinson Law School, a co-hire appointment in the Computational and Data Sciences department as well. And so that afforded me an opportunity to really lean into research from an academic point of view, and also with a legal mind, thinking about policy considerations for the development of the crypto economy, blockchain, and all of that. And we can kind of go down that, rabbit hole in a moment. But I say that to say it's so easy to get lost in jargon. And it is so easy for the average person to completely glaze over when people start saying cryptographically secured protocols, et cetera, that I wanted to find a way in a simple and accessible format for just the average person who's not a technologist, who may not be in finance, or the technologist who doesn't fully appreciate some of the underlying reasons why this type of technology, this idea of peer-to-peer cash, was actually a thing. Like, why is this important? Where did it come from? And that rabbit hole led me to just basically the 10 or 15 most commonly asked questions of me for the average person trying to get in. They trust me. They said, it doesn't appear that Professor Evans has gone crazy, but she's talking about this magic internet money, and I really want to get my arms around it. So this was a really great way for me to right size the conversation, separate fact from fiction, separate from a lot of the noise and confusion and carnival barking in the space, so that people can just have the right information at the right time to make an informed decision should they choose to purchase cryptocurrency.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dr. Evans is a law professor. I'm fascinated to also ask you, and I know this isn't in our original grouping of questions, but I'm also fascinated to ask you about the state of law today in America, because a lot of people interpret so the law differently, because there are a lot of armchair lawyers out there to sort of fit the narrative of the law to their benefit. So I'm just fascinated to get your general thoughts on the state of law today in America.
It's really interesting because so many things are in flux. And what we are quickly learning also is that you can't make a decision in isolation, that everything has a reverberating impact on other things. Laws are meant to provide the framework that we all trust either the organization, if we're talking about like corporate governance, or when you're thinking about government, that we all buy into a system that we have to trust. And it makes it really, really difficult when there's an erosion of trust around some of the institutions that used to be highly regarded, where regardless of kind of where people fall as on the political spectrum, we all at some point in my lifetime, way back in the day, actually had a center and a central and a common understanding of baseline facts. Now, your extrapolation of those facts and what you do with them based upon what you need for your family or your life, et cetera, may change, but a baseline set of facts is integral to the integrity of a legal system. And when those systems start to erode, then the confidence of the people that the law was intended to govern starts to erode as well. And that leads you down a path that can be very dangerous when you're trying to find your way back to what are the baseline facts so that we can formulate policy and laws and rules and regulations that make sense for the majority. So I'm a little concerned with the way that institutions have broken trust. The loss of trust is earned in many capacities. I'm hoping that we'll find our way back, but it is an interesting time in the world, particularly as I start to work on laws that apply to technology in general, the Web3 in particular, because it requires that people trust and that we innovate and we build policies and rules and regulations that really work.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dr. Evans, to that point, I'm wondering your thoughts on why do you think cryptocurrency has become so popular, and whether you think it needs better regulation as more people get more access to it. How can we make sure we use crypto currently effectively, but also safely as well?
Absolutely. And you know that I'm definitely committed when I think of my From Cash to Crypto program. It really was, I developed it for systemically marginalized folks to have better access, inclusion, better transparency, and to really start to analyze the type of power and sovereignty that comes from having more control over your money and the ability to transfer value between people without some of the intermediaries talking about it didn't depend on a government. I travel a lot right now. So the fact that I have to exchange money into local currency when we're living in an increasingly globalized world, society as a matter of value exchange is actually important. And it's empowering for me to be able to do that. I imagine a world, it won't be tomorrow, but I imagine a world that there will be a global reserve currency at some point in the future that doesn't depend on a particular nation state. When we think of the global reserve right now, it's the dollar, but we're also creeping very dangerously close to a default, which has cataclysmic impacts if it continues to go on. And it undercuts the confidence, not only in the United States, but around the world when other countries are starting to move back to a gold standard. We haven't actually been on a gold standard for decades. It requires the full faith and credit of the government. But imagine a world where it doesn't require government issued currency or what we call fiat for us to exchange. When I think about why or the state of the law for crypto now, I look at it at a macro level across nations, but also certainly in the United States. I recently testified before the House Financial Services Subcommittee on Digital Assets, Financial Technology, and Inclusion. And so we have committees and Congress people trying to make sense of it, trying to fashion rules. There are some existing rules that apply, like you can't be a thief. You have to pay your taxes. There are things that we don't have to make up new rules and laws for this type of what I would call programmable money. But then there is some space and some regulatory uncertainty as between the financial regulators, the ones that regulate the markets, the Securities and Exchange Commission or the SEC, the Commodity Future Tradings Commission or the CFTC. There's only agreement of one particular type of cryptocurrency, and it really revolves around Bitcoin. Bitcoin's the OG. It was the first. It was first launched in January of 2009. And it has an interesting history. It's gone through bull and bear markets. And so we kind of put that aside. There are over 24,000 different types of coins and tokens in the space. Many of them are securities, but our regulators can't even agree on a proper taxonomy, and that makes it difficult to govern. So I'm concerned in the United States in particular. It's an aggressive stance that seems to be driving innovation off of our shores and into other areas, markets where governments have just made it more clear. And in the process, it's not like our rules or lack of clarity will stop the technology. It's just going to move away. And I think that puts the United States or the citizens of the United States at a disadvantage, not only to invest, but also to build in the space, which I'm passionate about as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dr. Evans, as I'm sure you know, last week we celebrated Global Accessibility Awareness Day. And just a little bit about myself, Dr. Evans. I was born with what's called spastic quadriplegia cerebral palsy. Simply means that I don't have enough oxygen in my legs to walk normally. And it's important to me to build bridges of inclusion and acceptance wherever I can. So when we talk about access to money and building both financial and social capital, how important do you think it is to really infuse folks with disabilities into mainstream society?
When I think about all of the physical and systemic barriers to meaningful participation in a society, a lot of it has to do with financial freedom. Money is a tool, and it is a tool that can be used for good or for evil. But in order to participate fully and meaningfully in society, you have to have access, in particular, to a bank account. You have to have accessibility in terms of being able to access certain websites. There's so many parts of technology that require people to not consider accessibility as an afterthought, but meaningfully at the beginning when systems and user experience, user interfaces contemplate and appreciate and accommodate all citizens, not just the privileged few that have the privilege of certain type of health and wealth, et cetera. And it's not enough for the because I do think that in the blockchain and crypto ecosystem, there's a mantra that it's for everyone. I think people have to be more proactive about that. It's not enough to just build it and then everyone can participate without understanding the barriers to entry. There are a lot of barriers to entry that have been removed or lessened at the level of transparency, or not having to be beholden to a particular intermediary like a bank or a government or a system that doesn't want everybody to win. There is a barrier with respect to education. And I think the UI UX, or the user interface and experience of websites, the use of cold storage wallets that may not be amenable to all physically disabled folks or mentally. There are a whole lot of other areas where people aren't really building the infrastructure, the hardware, and the software that will meaningfully allow for participation. Is critically important, but there's also an opportunity for folks to build as well. Increasingly, people are like staying home and working remotely, and there are a lot of opportunities to build and to invest in ways that we couldn't conceive of in the 20th century.
Yeah, Dr. Evans, I always say that every opportunity we're given in life is an opportunity for growth, isn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, and Dr. Evans, I also know that you're a renowned speaker and you travel all over the country to talk to people in a motivational speaking sort of a platform. So tell me about the importance you place on sort of authentically connecting with people and how important you think that is.
Yeah, just when I think of a little fun fact about me, I'm a former professional tennis player. I went to Northwestern University on a full tennis scholarship. I graduated in 91 and I played on tour from 91 to 95, usually trying to grind it out at the satellite and challenger levels, trying to earn enough points to get into the majors. But in 93, I did win a national tournament and get a wild card into the qualifying rounds of the US Open. But and a number of other tournaments that year. It was probably my best year. There are two great things that came from being an elite athlete. One was getting a top tier education that was paid for. The other was being afforded the opportunity to travel the world. When we travel, it changes it should, if you're open, intellectually curious, and lean in to other cultures and other possibilities, that your way of life is great for you, but somebody else loves their life too, and they may live in Portugal, where I just returned from, or somewhere in the UAE, or in France or Italy, in the Caribbean, and on the continent of Africa. It changes the nature of our relationship to each other, and that requires an intellectual and cultural curiosity. It requires empathy. And all of those things strengthen the human being to really show up for people, so that, one of my core values is that I leave people, places, and things better than I found them. And that is my charge in life. And it doesn't depend on whether someone deserves it. Like, that's my contribution to the world, to be open, to continually learn. And, my grandmother used to say, get good counsel, but do your own deciding. Right? In order to get good counsel and to be informed, so that I've become a better teacher, a better writer, a better speaker, it requires leaning in from an intellectually and culturally curious point of view, to be open to conversations and people who are different than I am and have had different experiences, because I just think I'm just a better person for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Life is a constant growing experience, isn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely. Until I take my last breath.
Well, life, yeah, life always gives us an opportunity to learn. I always tell people that life is a lifelong learning experience too, isn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely. If we're doing it right. And it makes me think, I was I had a conversation recently about the education system. And even as a full tenured professor, I know we're doing a lot of things wrong. That the time that it takes to learn something, we're just speeding up the ability to teach people discrete tasks and kind of modularize education so that people get what they need when they need it, and that it also encourages and facilitates lifelong learning. There's so many people who stop learning after high school or college or even an advanced degree and learn just enough to be competent in their particular job, but never just learn for the process of learning, which really opens up the mind. But I'm thinking that this technology can also provide that opportunity as well, to, in the same way that money and value has become decentralized, so it doesn't centralize power in one particular place. We need to do that with education as well, to give more people an opportunity to learn more things that are relevant in the future of work and wealth and innovation.
Yeah, and since you brought this up, I'll follow up with this, Dr. Evans. I'm fascinated to ask you about educational equity in today's
Mm,
society, because you look what's happening in places like Florida, for example, where they've banned the study of African American studies
mhm.
in like state universities, or the teaching of DEI programs. So I'm fascinated to ask you about the state of educational equity also in America today.
It's a really frightening time. It's difficult for me to fully appreciate in this day and age that we would be fighting over things that we'd taken for granted. And I want people to pay attention, because this time, I mean, every year for the last 8 years, it seems, I've been saying that this is, such a cataclysmic, pivotal moment, right? An inflection point where we can go dangerously one way or another. And it starts by just the gradual erosion of being informed. An informed citizenry is the type of citizenry that holds their elected officials accountable, that we're not anesthetized with, and I love a good TV show that doesn't mean anything, but at a certain point, we really have to focus and say, if there's so many things that are distracting us, what's behind that? What is behind outlawing books that have stood the test of time? And I think of like Toni Morrison's work, or Alice Walker, or all of these books that inform our understanding of culture, of history, of imagination, of creativity, of truth. It makes me think of how it was illegal, for example, for an enslaved population here in the United States not to read. If the enslaved population was so dumb, why did you have to create a rule, right? If this enslaved population is so dumb, why did we have to bring Africans out of the continent to come and create this grand experiment where systems were built on the backs of free labor? Like, what is going on? In what ways are we doomed to repeat the past in more nuanced and subtle ways if we're not careful? It's really dangerous to start banning learning and connection and creating these false things, because I believe that we're more alike than disalike or dissimilar. And at the root of it is this insidious idea that certain books should be banned. I feel that's just really, really dangerous and very bad, clearly, for education.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dr. Evans, I'm curious to go back to crypto just for a moment, because I know you have some common myths that you dispel. And tell me, how do you think people can be smart crypto investors as well?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I've come up with something that I think a lot of people consider to be an oxymoron. It's like, can you be a prudent crypto investor? And I would argue that you can if you're like me. I'm actually one of the most risk adverse people that people who knew me before I started this work can't understand how I'm doing it. And people who know me for this work in the policy and education space for crypto wonder what I could ever have done before. And it's really, I think it's that level of sensitivity. It is my training as a lawyer. I'm licensed in 4 states, in New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and DC. So I take that very seriously. I came up in big law. I was the editor-in-chief of my law journal at Howard University School of Law. So my critical thinking skills are usually on exponential. and I'm curious but critical, trying to understand like what is the point of this? What are the risks that people have to figure out? And what I've come to understand and what I teach, not only in law schools, but also at Advantage Evans Academy, where I work with regular investors and also leaders about preparing for the future of money and the future of work, is that you can be prudent. And in fact, if you don't do anything else after listening to this episode, committing to learning the language of crypto assets, learning how to vet and select, how to protect them, all of those things are going to be critically important because crypto is here to stay. Every major government is working on its own version of a digital dollar or a central bank digital currency. What makes that different than from Bitcoin? What makes it different from Ethereum and other coins and tokens in the space? Why are there 24,000 and counting? What does that mean when we try and apply traditional investment metrics to an emerging asset class? What does it mean when you take advantage of a first mover advantage when others are fearful and you get the opportunity to lean in, be a first mover, and maybe have sizable returns? The downside of a risky investment is the upside is that you can win. The downside is you can lose big as well. So the idea of balancing an overall portfolio with all of the traditional things we would already do, investing in, or at least looking into real estate, stocks and bonds, intellectual property, business ownership, but as a part of a larger portfolio, there's a lot of opportunity to make money over the long term, not in the short term, but over the long term that can have a sizable win. I have personally benefited from that. And I want people to understand the advantage, the sizable advantage you have when you're a first mover in an emerging space, but you have to do it legally and safely and confidently.
Yeah, you never want to be, you always want to be the first, but you never want to be the last.
Never,
right?
Don't hold the bag because it's usually empty.
That's exactly right. And Dr. Evans, I know another way that you educate people is through your weekly podcast, where you have engaging and informative conversations about what we've been talking about today. So tell me about your podcast and what it's all about.
Absolutely. So it's called the Tech Intersect Podcast, and I focus on interviews and some solo episodes, but mostly interviews of new and notable folks working at the intersection of law and business and technology. And recently, because of my work in the crypto space, and certainly as a result of Digital Money Demystified coming out, I focused more specifically on some of the myths that you mentioned earlier to right-size the conversation there. I've had some of the notables, like one of the commissioners from the SEC, Hester Peirce, on, and the chief legal officer at Coinbase come on. He also testified on the same panel before House Financial Services as well. But then I have emerging folks who are working in AI and or doing things that are better, faster, cheaper in the tech space, but with a decided focus on the future of money. Looking at myths like whether crypto is just for criminals, or is it a fad? Is it unregulated? Is it just for crypto bros, or is there enough space for us all? So I have a lot of really intriguing and interesting conversations to explore this intersection of business and law and technology, and with a future forward point of view. So it makes it really fun. It every week on Fridays, I have a new episode that drops. I've been doing this since December of 2019. So I think I'm up to almost 160 episodes. Now, a few of them were repeats, but I never missed a week, and I'm proud of that. And you know how difficult that is to stand up a pod and have it go regularly. But I enjoy it. I've had great conversations, and it keeps me on top of my game too, because I have to do a lot of research to ask the great questions like you are asking today.
Yeah, well, if you go into podcasting, there's a benefit to being consistent, isn't there?
Absolutely, and then there's a benefit and a pressure, a benefiting pressure. But I do look forward to the conversations because I feel like I always learn something new. I imagine you feel the same way because you cover such a wide swath of topics, and you stay super current with those topics, so that you have your finger on the pulse of what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely, Dr. Evans. And I'm curious to also ask you about the concept of sustainable wealth,
Mm.
particularly for Black Americans, because, when we look at the world today, I think financial education is so vitally important to really creating an environment of sustainable wealth. So, how do you think we can achieve sustainable wealth over the long term,
Hmm.
particularly for the Black community as well?
It's interesting because even with my educational privilege, I never learned as much about finances as I had to learn in order to fully appreciate and leverage crypto to my benefit. And it's been actually fun. It's been empowering to have a base foundation in investing and what it means to not just focus on high income, which is actually taxed at a higher rate, but to use my money to invest in assets and create assets that actually work harder than me. In order to really become wealthy, not just rich or not just receiving a high income, being a high net worth individual, which was originally my goal. This idea of wealth is creating and investing in assets that actually go out there and work harder than me, that actually have a significant return on investment over time, and also strong diversity within a portfolio and within an asset class as well, so that sometimes stocks are booming and the housing market is flat or down. Sometimes crypto is booming and stocks take a hit. Sometimes everything's down. We think about the last 3 years in particular and the macroeconomic impact on all sectors and industries, not just one. At many places, it wasn't a failure per se of crypto or of stocks. It was just what was going on. We were having this existential crisis and this very real health crisis as well. And understand the energy of money, the tool of money, not just to pay the bills, but to unlock the potential of assets so that you will be good in good times and bad. It's not enough just to invest in traditional assets. It's not enough, although it's important to be educated. It's not because we know a lot of people who don't seem to be particularly educated and they are winning from a dollars and cents point of view, but to always stay ahead of the curve and to have a balancing and a rebalancing, which really requires that we show up and really learn what it means, not just to create wealth in one generation, but what succession planning involves as well, which can be particularly challenging for the crypto space. My podcast episode this week for Tech Intersect, and folks can go to whatever platform you're listening to this on. I shoot it out to YouTube. It's on all of your apps. It had to do with a number of things, but one in particular, how to plan for a crypto estate because of the way that autonomy, self-sufficiency, managing your own wallet, being your own bank, that's kind of a blessing and a challenge if you pass on and others can't access it. And so that becomes a challenge as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Dr. Evans, as an educator, I'm fascinated to ask you your concept or view on the concept of what I call sort of consistent resiliency, and
Mm.
how important it is to be consistently resilient. And for you in particular, why is it so important to impact the lives of young people as an educator?
Oh, this is such a wonderful question because consistency and resilience in and of themselves are very powerful and important. As a matter of consistency, we talked, for example, of consistently showing up and being a woman of my word and dropping um, content that people can rely on. But also, there's a balance to that, to consistently taking care of myself when I'm tired, or to put myself in a good position so that I can also not only be consistent for others and for myself, but that idea of resilience, which also leans into a certain level of flexibility, creating space that everything can't be carefully curated, that at some point we are receiving constant feedback and data. This idea of playing the game from my childhood of getting warmer, getting colder, right? There's a resilience that we have in times of crisis. And that comes from consistently working on yourself and creating the tools, the mental, physical, spiritual tools to weather the storm, because storms come. And the idea to, on the other side of that, as a matter of leveraging resources, asking for help, also the idea of knowing that if you are still breathing, you have survived 100% of your worst days. That is a concept and an idea that propels me forward, even though when things look bleak. I'm an only child, and I remember when the pandemic first hit, and I was also teaching. I was the associate dean at University of New Hampshire Franklin Pierce School of Law, and I'm good being by my own self, but when I choose to, not when I've locked myself in the house with my mask and my my boosters and praying for a good outcome. But the ability on the other side of the worst of it, I'll put it that way, to know that I not only survived but thrived, and that's what I want to also impart with my students, particularly law students, because we have this formulaic way that we teach as a matter of critical thinking and issue spotting and problem solving. But that also requires that we have enough space to be resilient in all circumstances, to be fortified, and to protect ourselves and prepare ourselves for a journey. So this final point, when I think of consistent resilience, it's not in isolation, it's a process, it's an evolution, and it's something that is a continually showing up for yourselves and others, and gaining strength from that.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dr. Evans, I've got two more questions for you. One of them is a two-part question, which I'll end on. But the first question that I have for you is about the debt ceiling. We're getting dangerously close to running out of money for America to pay its debts. And as you know, as you turn on the news, one of the consistent headlines for the last couple of weeks has been the debt ceiling debate. So I'm fascinated because we talked about a little bit about it earlier, but to get your perspective on the state of sort of negotiations and how it would affect America if they do indeed default for the first time in their history.
Yeah, we're effectively really, even though they're 2 weeks, if things aren't resolved by the end of this week, and I'm sorry to say I don't have any confidence that it will be done by this week, because this is a massive ship that does not turn on a dime. Mm-hmm. And the consequences are, just at a micro level, spending up to the maximum on your credit card and then deciding I'm not going to pay. That's effectively what this means. This is not new money. I know that a lot of negotiations are trying to connect promises for future spending budgets with the debt ceiling and raising it to accommodate the change in interest rates and things that change from the time that you actually buy services or goods and the time that the bill comes due. The bill is due. Our system is not built on or supported by the gold reserve. We are built on the full faith and credit of this government. And if we don't show up and pay the debts that we owe for services and goods already received, credit rating goes down. More countries start moving away from the dollar as a reserve because they're losing confidence, they're losing faith, they're losing trust, which is one of the reasons that Bitcoin launched in the first place. Bitcoin was actually built for times like this. And then the reverberating effect for uh, government employees to be furloughed, independent contractors not to be paid. It calls into question when Social Security and Medicare benefits, like there's this whole system, this network that is supported based on the full faith and credit of the government. And if we don't get this right, it's kind of like we're getting to the find out stage. We will find out, but it's very dangerous to play with the full faith and credit of the government.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Dr. Evans, as we end our time together today, I'm fascinated to ask you about, when you think about your defining moment of difference in your own personal life, how would you answer that question? And when you look at your own personal and professional legacy, I'm wondering how you want that to be defined.
I love this so much because been thinking a lot about this kind of in the second stage of life where I'm just really, really happy and content to have the freedom to do everything I want and nothing I don't, which is a very empowering place to be, where I've lived enough that I have some sense and I have some dollars and cents as well. And so that comes together at a really good time to say, with imagination and the curiosity of little Tonya a long time ago, of play and of rest, of rediscovery. And I would love to be known for someone who reconnected continually and resiliently reconnected with her creative self to figure out what that meant at each stage of my life. So, I had some traditional and non-traditional paths to what I'm doing right now, as a creative person, as an athlete, as a scholar, and someone who's intellectually curious. And so as a writer, speaker, and teacher, if I'm most well known for consistently and continually being creative, finding new ways to express my skills, and new ways from a very free perspective to do the best I can for my family and for others, and to leave that as a legacy, I'll be super proud of that life.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Dr. Evans, just before I ask you how people can get a hold of you if they're interested in connecting, one of the reasons I was excited to talk to you, Doctor, was because I don't know if you knew this about myself, but I originally went to school to become a sports reporter. So I was excited to learn about your tennis background. And I have to tell you, I almost went to law school when I was deciding what to do after high school. And I found out that law school was a lot longer than journalism school. So that's what tipped the scales in that direction. Okay,
That's fair.
But law is my second passion in life. I grew up watching things like Cops and Judge Judy, and court TV is on a regular dial on my house. So I love the legal profession, and I want to thank you for your contributions to it. And tell me, if people want to get connected with you, Dr. Evans, what's the best way they can do that?
There are two great ways. One certainly is to go to my professional website. So that's proftonyaevans.com. It's TONYAEVANS, and the prof for professor. So that's a great stop. And then if you want to learn more about my book, how to pre-order as well, and pre-ordering is really critically important. It signals to the industry and to others that my voice matters in the space to help educate people about cryptocurrency. You can go to digitalmoneydemystified.com to do that. And that will lead you not only to the book, but other opportunities for people to just get in quickly. The book comes out October 24th, 2023. So I hope you invite me back closer in time and we can dig more into the myths and all of that. But so I encourage people to pre-order. But at that page, you can also learn about the Digital Money Demystified bundle. It's an inexpensive way to get started now with a short course, lots of resources to support you on your journey. And that's a great way to connect with my inner circle community as well. It's vibrant. We share a lot of resources, and the inner circle is free. So it's a great way. It's kind of like Facebook, but not Facebook. And so those are the ways that are best. ProfTanyaEvans.com and digitalmoneydemystified.com.
Fabulous. Well, Dr. Evans, I'll certainly invite you back when the book comes out, because October 24th happens to be my grandmother's birthday, so I won't forget it, okay?
Yay, that's wonderful. Excellent. We channeled grandmothers today. I love it.
Absolutely. And I have to quickly tell you that one of the reasons also I was excited to talk to you was you and my mother share the same first name, so there you go.
Okay, another Tanya. Yes.
So my mom told me to treat you with grace, dignity, and respect today. So I hope I followed my mother's orders. But in all seriousness, Dr. Evans, I really want to applaud you for your work in the space and for joining me to engage in conversation about cryptocurrency and the state of education in America. Your work in the space and time on my behalf is most appreciated. And I want to thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much, Kevin. I look forward to our next time together.